Good afternoon to you all, and I hope that you have been well. I hope that you enjoyed Heroes Day, and at least one of you got a medal. So my name is Isabella Akiteng, and I'm going to be moderating today's show. And joining me on the panel are three amazing women, one of who has just thrown her pen. So we will start with Maria Alesi. You're very much welcome to the show, Maria.
Must you drag me publicly? Thank you, Bella, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yes, and then we also have Munduru joining us from Action Aid, but also a sister in the struggle.
From West Nile.
Yes.
I'm very honored to be here once again. Why did you ask if I did get
Masi, you did not get a medal.
Yeah.
If you were on a list to State House, I have a feeling your name would be
That does not mean I don't. That does not mean I don't deserve one.
We know how this medal.
So I came wearing my medals in my ears.
And on my far left, I have Tricia, Gloria, and Nabaye, who is also joining us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, viewers.
And all of us are not strangers to the show, so I believe that this is going to be quite the interesting show. And we're going to be discussing the State of the Nation address. The last time I was here, the president had just spoken to us, and in his speech, he had told us he would be back. So he came back. He came back to continue talking about the locusts and the oil, which he had given as a preamble in one of his presidential addresses earlier on, I think about 2 weeks ago. So today we are going to go into the into the State of the Nation address, which is provided for by law under Article 101, subsection 1, section 1. Yes. And so it's provided for. So it's not that he came because he wanted to talk to us, but it's mandated by law that he gives a State of the Nation address, which precedes the budget reading, which we will be having this week. So before we get into the detail of the State of the Nation address, the highlights. What was your highlight in these 35 pages of address that the president gave us? Mercy, would you like to go? I remember you spent the whole day on one of the television stations.
Wow.
Yeah. Before, after, during.
Wow.
So what was your highlight?
So I literally, listened to the State of the Nation address because I had to give my reflections, but it was nothing short of what I had thought it would be. Of course, the highlight for me was his solutions to the current economic meltdown in the country, which was the anticipation of all citizens. They were expecting, of course, the government to come out and give them solutions or avenues to jump out of the current meltdown. And so his response to that really, had me speechless, especially, saying that we have to depend on diplomacy for this situation to end, and gave us already a highlight of what was going on, including the president of the African Union going to meet with Putin to find solutions of Africa's problem. And also the fact that the president of the US had spoken to, the Arabian prince about pumping more petroleum from the ground to sort of respond to the petroleum crisis, and also assured us that the government will not in any way cut down taxes or offer any relief on the current commodity prices, because if they do, then a couple of roads that he listed will not be worked on. That would mean that it's a direct impact on infrastructure. So for me, that was really the highlight, because I also know that citizens were anticipating or waiting for what he was going to say about that. But of course, the coffee deal as well.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think for me, like in addition to everything Mercy has said, it like that speech for me was a reminder that we're on our own as citizens, and the faster we accept that, and the faster we appreciate that and craft responses towards understanding that we're on our own, I think will be a way maybe we can eventually pressure the state into doing what it is supposed to do. For me, the highlight, aside from what Mercy has said, was on the discussion around corruption, where the president told us that there's a factory that did not take off because people got bribes from the poor Chinese man.
Sorry for laughing.
Yes, like it was sad and funny. And then he goes on to say, I know the people who stole the money I just don't have enough facts, but
To get
Katonda
them
Jali. Like, you guys, do you know the meaning of that phrase, Katonda Jali? Like,
I know this.
we are literally, like, he has, as a head of state, he has gotten a problem that can be solved by actual action, because we're not discussing earthquakes or
Pandemics
hailstones
or locusts.
yes, we are addressing a problem that inherently he has participated in creating over the years, and then he has thrown it to this higher power that we don't know. Like me, I've gotten to the point in my life, I'm like, but this God thing, we're going to have a whole other debate on. I remember someone once wrote an article that God needs to leave Uganda, and I completely agree with that person, because where we have reached,
because we're using it.
Yes, the head of state has told us Katonda Yamani. He knows the people who have been stealing. He's telling us he can't find the facts, which is completely dishonest, because
He has just said that. No, but he has also just said that we took money from the poor Chinese man.
Yes. On top of the fact that we know that if the state wanted to know where you sleep facing at night,
they would
get that information. So,
and they know where you stay, because they can find you.
Yes, they can find you and your grandparents and where they were buried, and even remove them from their graves. So for me, the highlight was like, we are completely on our own, and we need to frame our way of thinking and engaging with the state, knowing that we are on our own.
Indeed.
And I think he keeps strengthening that argument, because even in the previous address that he gave, his solutions to all these problems was that we be frugal. It wasn't good.
Yes.
Let's be frugal. Be frugal, eat cassava, walk. Yes, please.
And maybe just to piggyback on what she said, we are not really on our own as such if we come to the realization that our government has never been for us. And I think we are coming in the evening of the regime where they're trying to pick whatever we can, pick the scrambles and disappear. Maybe leave a charade for little baby general and, have things go on. But for me, my highlight, as always, in all his speeches is that he begins with God, traumatizes you into the incidences of testimonies and all these things, to a point where now scripture is being used to govern this country. And he, psychologically deals with the public in that regard. So he will use it for his benefit. I don't know how that is a weapon that he has mastered, but for some reason, every other speech that he is coming to, I'm pretty sure tomorrow in the budget speech, he will have a scripture to begin his day with.
Galatians.
Yes. And so, cut across at the beginning of the speech, even before he speaks of anything that concerns the state, he begins with, when you look at this scripture, the foolish man and the wise man, and so he has reduced us to either church folks,
Sunday school.
You people don't abuse people who teach Sunday
or
school.
Bible study. Bible study class.
Our host is a teacher.
I know.
Sunday school.
Or Bible study class. And so we can no longer have, conversations around the state without, turning them into biblical narratives or biblical points. I find it degrading.
And he then does not put out the accountability.
Exactly.
In the Bible really has clear mechanisms for accountability.
Yes.
Whereas it will tell you what to do and what not to do, and the fact that you have freedom to do what you choose to do, there's also a price to pay, the consequences. So the fact that we only choose to have one side of the Bible in terms of what it says or whatever
and
it
how
promises,
it works for him.
Yeah, but never the accountability. For me,
and maybe that takes us into should I say the first overview question. The State of the Nation address is supposed to be a very serious event. It's provided for constitutionally. But as time has gone on, we have realized that there's an unseriousness. And we cannot even say that it's the unseriousness of how the president reads the address. There's also an unseriousness in how the address is written,
Yeah, true.
And so it begs the question that have we decided to trivialize the important conversations in this country? Because originally, as someone who used to listen to the president, I felt that he brought his humor into these speeches. Now I prefer to read his addresses than listen. And as I read this address, there was a section where it was saying, and President Biden of America is crying over baby formula. Like, what does that say about how this country is treating the more important conversations that matter to the people. Yes.
I also think it begs the question of hope, yeah? Citizens anticipate occasions like this to really put the government in a place where they regain their hope, but also really to get tangible solutions. Citizens want confidence in communicated through clear strategies to get them out of their realities and the issues that they're grappling with. And it's really a fact that we've been grappling with so many issues. And so a forum like this is a forum where we have serious conversations. By the way, within this address, there's supposed to be a time for reaction to the speech, but that didn't happen.
True.
That didn't happen. And even before that, there was a disclaimer made, about the fact that now that the opposition did not come, how those questions are supposed to be phrased in that moment, which for me then goes to what you are saying about how much value do we attach to a day like this. But also just the fact that in communicating these issues, it's a one-sided communication.
True.
The citizens have communicated what they are expecting through different forums. The least you can do is to have an opportunity. I'll just give an example of a neighboring country, Kenya. So when it came to Workers' Day, for example, that was the opportunity for the president to, offer solutions to questions around employment, wages, and all of that. And the president of Kenya strategically used that opportunity to communicate their decision to increase the minimum wage.
True.
Yes.
How timely, For a moment, that even if you are not going to directly benefit from this, even as a citizen of another country, I felt like, wow.
Yeah.
This occasion aligns with exactly what the issues of the citizens are. From an address like this one, I did not find solutions, not even to the basic things. There were very many questions, core issues addressed in the communication. But then what for me was missing is the solutions, positive responses and clear strategies in terms of where are we going from here, taking, a stock of everything this country has been through.
Yes.
For this 1 year, not just the recent things, because the things that dominated this speech were the recent things, the coffee deal, the fuel prices, all these, the Paris Development Model, which was launched a couple of months ago. So these were all recent events, but we had a whole year to this day, a whole financial year. We needed to take stock of what happened in the entire financial year. What did we have the last time? What progress have we made? Where are we at? What are some of the new and emerging issues that then came out this year? Then I would understand.
Yes, because under normal circumstances, it should be able to give us a sneak peek into the budget.
Exactly.
True.
And right now, Yes, Maria.
Yeah, so for me, in terms of language and delivery, I think the president does not respect Ugandans on any front. I think it would be very naive and foolish of us as citizens to think that the president actually respects us. You take in the tone from during the pandemic to the last address where he told people to be frugal and eat cassava to now, right? Especially because, the people that he is addressing, the ones whose lives he's trivializing, that the remark on, yes, it was related to the US, but not just the US, because the formula problem is not just an American problem. It is actually a global problem, and it's a problem that addresses critical issues of women's maternal care, right? And that's a big part of access to healthcare as well, that formula is not a discussion of privilege. Formula is more a discussion of a child being able to receive the necessary nutrition at the point when the mother is unable to, for various reasons, give them the breast milk or even feed them exclusively for the 6 months that are required. So for me, it's like the language in itself, my struggle with listening to the State of the Nation address is always in the dehumanization of the citizens of Uganda. We are not people. When he's talking about agriculture, when he's talking about, because he assumes, I think at the back of his mind, he assumes that Ugandans are lazy people who don't want to work, and yet Ugandans are toiling on a daily, fighting a system that is completely broken. And you can see this from how he's very obsessed with the idea that he's getting white or people from outside Uganda, basically, to come and invest here, because I think at the back of his mind, he thinks Ugandans are foolish, like he sees ears and eyes and thinks we are goats, right? So for me, that is my struggle with the entire State of the Nation address, that the head of state, who claims that we vote him into power, that Ugandans like him very much, they're always begging him to come back, does not exercise any form of respect or empathy towards the people who, and this is really me dragging religious leaders who come and tell us leadership comes from God. I was about to say something, but this is children's TV also, but you all need, like, may rain fall in your beds, religious leaders, because you have also enabled someone who comes and speaks to us in that tone, who does not look at his role as a stewardship, like you make it seem like it's a responsibility given. So for me, in terms of like the tone and the language that he uses, the humor is critical in easing the way like stuff is delivered. But at this point in the things people have been through as a nation, humor is not the thing you use as the head of state to deliver critical, because we're at this point where we're debating, we don't have resources. Like, people don't have money. To borrow the words of Kapshenga, we are broke. Yes, like, people don't have money for the basics. We're not even discussing us trying to go on a trip or play tower here. Like, those are other things, right? Basics, like, people at a critical point where the term is coming to an end. We don't know where people don't know where they're going to get school fees, right? Because kids are going to come back with higher fees because the prices are going up, right? Exactly. So for me, it's that tone, and it's like the lack of gravity in the situation, the experiences of people whose meager taxes sustain your lifestyle.
Indeed.
Because on no day of the week does Museveni wake up to think about the price of soap in his everyday, because that's stuff that's catered for. Cooking oil, like, he doesn't know the price of toothpaste. Like, he knows it for purposes of a speech, but he doesn't know it for purposes of I am spending.
As he spoke, the figure of my pay just flashed on my head.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
So for me, that is my, like, when it comes to delivery, it's just like, it's such a disrespectful 3 hours of citizens' time. And I think, because I watched it live online, and someone said in the chat section, well, what are you doing here? Go away for your mental health purposes. And that person had such a critical point. That guys, let's go away from here, because we're going to leave this place more devastated. Like, we have things to engage with every day, and now we're also here
having to deal with this.
Our lives being trivialized in a speech by the head of state.
Indeed. And maybe just to come from there, earlier in the weeks, I sat down with women from the marketplaces. And when you hear a plight of just making sure that they make 10,000 a day to have something to take home, and a lady will tell you, I would rather forfeit eating a meal in the day so that at least I can go buy maybe sweet potatoes and maybe just vegetables to be able to take home. And on the days that I have not, I'm quick to take the children into bed because I'm equally frustrated that they've not eaten. And at the back of my mind was that, how is it that on an everyday experience, these women wake up, look for money, and for lack of a better thing, there is no way this government is even going to plan for them in this coming financial year. And then you have a head of state stand and say, we dealt with locusts. And for me, the narrative around locusts was that there was a lot of money that was wasted. That the locusts would have eaten them. We would have eaten the locusts. And then, but the money, the billions of money that was spent there. And then you think about the supplementary budgets. Literally, the State House and any other ministry is also living every day. They need some more money just to survive. And so I'm imagining a person who makes less than 3,000 a day, trying to make sense of 3 hours of your life being trivialized in things like, I will bring investors here. You refused Pinete because for me, I told her to come and do this coffee for you guys. But there are people here that work. You trivialize Casita. It's like you were bringing for us old clothes. But the narrative is you've not even invested in production within Uganda. Nitil is rotting away because there is no actual investment in production within Uganda. And
also
then,
because people really can't afford the clothes, you guys.
indeed.
Yes, like buying a
He was
90
wearing-
shirt
Is hard.
vis-a-vis.
He was
Bed
wearing-
sheets.
Yes.
He was wearing one.
Yes, of
But
course he
at
buys it.
what price?
It was
At a
your pay as
taxpayer's
you
money
earn.
and at
Your
what
pay as
price?
you earn
Yes.
went and
The
got
figure
your-
keeps
Yeah.
coming back.
And so, and then even before the State of Nation address, the aura around it, the cars that were zooming in, I was in shock that there was, there were
Mercedes
Benzes. Yes.
limousines.
And so you're coming to speak to people that are grieving, other people that are in recovery, and you're flashing all this money to literally tell them in your face, literally, you're not the priority. We are the government that is sitting. And I also love, the stance the opposition took to keep away. More than anything, it spoke better than them sitting within it and booing or even walking out mid speech. It speaks to the realities of toinacho tugamba, because you failed to deal with the critical issues of the masses. So whatever you're going to say is almost akin to sitting an NRM caucus and cheerleading each other. So toinacho tugamba, let's walk away. Let's let you have your day, and we will figure a way of dealing with the issues as they happen, maybe on the floor of parliament or in another avenue. But if you're coming to trivialize issues that are critical for Ugandans, as just having, a relief on, let's have a relief, let's have food shared. But then also within the week, at the end of the speech, I read something and someone was like, every other time I'm pissed with this country, I remember how Ugandans at their lowest gave to this country. And I was
During
like,
the
you know
COVID
what?
lockdown.
I can't be any more pissed, because even at our lowest, we were willing, at the height of a pandemic where people didn't have, we were willing to give to this country on top of the taxes that we pay. And that was, the cloud of maybe apathy that reigned through the 3 hours that man talked.
No, I just want to pick up on Ugandans giving. For me, I think that's like an important thing, right? That Ugandans, even in their lowest, give. It's just, what do we now want to give towards? Because you see, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were in a state where we thought maybe this is the one time that the state, I'm one of those people who give, right? When that space where this is the one time we're hoping that, because it's a matter of life and death, that government is going to actually organize itself, right? Anyway, in the words of the other MP in the parking lot, you are a thief.
Sad.
Okay, but that takes me into us having a conversation around the paradoxes, the paradox, the different. I don't know, is it paradoxes, paradigm? Anyway, those things, those. But the very many paradox moments we had within the speech that. Within the State of the Nation address, because I know that just after the parable from Matthew 7:24-27, that's the parable of the foolish man and the wise man, and just after that we had a remembrance moment where we remembered the locusts, we remembered the rising water, we remembered COVID, we remembered the pandemics, but didn't ever come back to talk about how we deal with that as a country. But that's a conversation we can have later on. The president then goes in and we have a celebration moment on the expansion of the economy, and we go back to 1986 and come back, and there's a celebration on the expansion of the economy, but also the celebration of us as a country of surplus. And the president goes ahead and he says we have a surplus in sugar, a surplus in maize, a surplus in eggs, a surplus in cement. He also says that we have a surplus in dairy products, which Uncle Biden was crying over, and we could easily have sent milk. And yet, your remarks in the last couple of minutes have not in any way pointed towards this surplus. And I know that when Tricia was talking about, he talked about again the paradox of the Benzes and the people who came in to listen to this speech.
We forgot about the fact that the MPs allocated themselves allowances.
Yes, okay.
Just before.
So can we have a conversation on the paradox? Because also, if we are to go back to the president's previous speech, he categorized us. These days he deals in binaries. Foolish, wise. At that time it was reactionaries and revolutionaries. Okay? So we now have a paradox where we are seemingly living and existing in an abundance. Your thoughts?
Wow. sometimes I think I'm really not living in the same country with you.
Yes.
Perhaps that has to do with the fact that I come from West Nile, that's close to Congo and Sudan. So it's very easy to identify with either of the two and sort of just live in that bubble. But I mean, yeah, we remembered everything except violence against women. And since we're on a women's show, I just need to throw this one out there so that if I forget, it's one of the things that we always forget.
Yeah.
And yet, in the incident report from police, they were decrying the high levels of gender-based violence amidst COVID, post-COVID, even with the economic meltdown. But we, we deliberately chose to forget, as usual. That is one of the things. And for me, that's a paradox in itself. Like, we can talk about everything in this country, not that one.
True.
That affects the majority of your population, and you're speaking about development. How do you speak about development without speaking about violence against women and the limitations of women's participation in these processes? For me, that gets me all the time. Like, I sit deliberately wanting to listen to what it is, whether at least you can acknowledge that this has been a big problem and we overcame it this way. We committed these amounts of resources. I would smile, even if I frowned at the entire speech. I would say, for once, we've recognized something that should be recognized. So for me, that is one of the problems. But coming back to, the paradox for me, it is that, I think I can agree to the fact that Uganda, compared to many countries, is a productive country. We've been blessed with good weather, hardworking people, like Maria said, people that love peace, people that are generous, people that, are selfless, I must say. That's how Ugandans are. Ugandans are not violent people. No, otherwise, if we were violent people, I promise you would have no country. Uganda is just not seeing a fully fledged, violent situation because people actually choose peace. And I commend Ugandans for that. But outside of that, we are poorly governed. That's why whether we have abundance, whether we have rain, whether we have seasons, we cannot be who we're supposed to be. Why aren't we in the middle income status as is? Why aren't we?
He actually said we've reached.
No.
And then I was like, how?
For you to hit that mark, you should sustain it for 3 years for you to actually be considered in that bracket. So as far as I'm concerned, no, we haven't.
True.
And we could have reached long ago, but we're poorly governed. That is it. That's not a secret. And so when you're speaking about all of these things, and yet when we're watching TV, you're seeing the complete opposite. MPs have just allocated themselves, tons of money for their allowances. Do this when you're fighting for the country, when you're offering actual solutions to their issues. And then we've just had a debate about 2 billion.
True.
Going towards procuring expensive, vehicles for senior government officials. And then you tell me that you cannot reduce prices on imports. And then the paradox, actually, let me just speak about the coffee deal, for example. Now, everything around that coffee deal is great. The idea is great. I mean, you want to raise the value of coffee and the fact that we don't have value addition facilities here. And so if we had them, then Uganda would be in a certain position and match up to other countries in terms of value of the coffee, because we have the coffee. We're the world's biggest, exporter of coffee. Great ideas. Now, you are bringing a non-Ugandan who is not experienced, in his words.
Yes.
And she is coming to establish this huge facility. To get her coffee to that level, by the way, is a lot of work. It's not a walk in the park. It's a great idea, but you have to deploy the right human capital.
True.
You have to have done enough research. It's not. It's like it's like a pyramid scheme. What they sold to him was the way somebody can sell to you a pyramid scheme. They'll tell you, if us, 4 of us were sitting. I'm sorry, my mouth. If 4 of us were sitting on this panel, each contributed 5 million, this would be 20 million. And if you put 20 million times 12 months,
now if you got your sister under you.
That's great when you're listening. But then remember, the moment you guys have put your 5 million, I've already received my 20 million.
Yes.
Whether you bring your family members or fail, which is always the case, you have already gotten my 20.
Yes.
So this is it with that deal. Because you've sold the deal, but there's so much that must go into having this facility deliver what it's supposed to. The first floor is getting somebody who you acknowledge does not have the experience. Point number one, but has connections. And for me, that's a problem.
Contact.
Just like so many beautiful ideas we've weaved in the past. And then we don't have the human capital to deliver. And therefore, they're never effective. They never live up to the expectation for which they're set up. So for me, that's one of the paradoxes. You're beating up the West in your speech. But your only aspiration for us to get out of poverty involves the West. and also sell the product to the West.
Throughout the whole conversation, his
speech.
solution was the West.
And yet another paradox is the commitment to Pan-Africanism. But anyway, Maria, please come in and make your rejoinder. You've been taking notes enthusiastically.
Guys, I'm still laughing at the pyramid scheme thing. Anyway, so for me, there are many things, like you said.
Money was stolen.
So let me start from
our mother's money.
Let me start from the obsession with figures. So that entire speech is telling us numbers, and we know that the current economic system of measuring growth is flawed, because if we say Ugandans are at middle income status, we're getting the money in the country and giving it to everybody, right? Assuming that everybody is earning this specific amount of money. On top of the fact that we have not even done a census in a very long time. We don't have an actual practice of tracking data annually. I still don't understand why we do a census, even because we should have a system of collecting this information. So
I identified as a boda during the
wonderful. So
okay.
So the obsession with figures, because it's so what happened during the pandemic was that we had a lot of money come into the country, whether it was grants, loans, in the spirit of fighting the pandemic. And so that money was still held within the economy. There's also been there was also a lot of reduced expenditure within the economic time. So once we opened up, people were spending more of whether it is the money that they saved and things like that. So for me, I'm struggling with that figure. I think it's a lie. Yes, so the state has to be able to provide us with actual evidence and backed up data to show us where they came up with this figure from. So the obsession with numbers, because the other thing is, at the beginning of the pandemic, or somewhere in the middle, Uganda Bureau of Statistics also told us that a lot of Ugandans had slid into poverty. Yes,
especially my region.
So that contradiction is for me the thing that I am sitting with right now, that either someone forgets the things or his handlers are not doing a good job in making sure the story is consistent and continuous. So, Your Excellency, you need new handlers. The other contradiction I was dealing with is the discussion around cash crops. So there was a big conversation around, people should plant cotton. If you plant 1 acre of cotton, 1 million shillings, sugar. Then he went and said, you see, for example, sugar in Busoga. Historically, Busoga has existed in poverty because of sugar. Right?
Almost.
I have just been there. Please organize another show and I digest to you the conversation I had with communities at the plantations, and especially the women.
Yes. On top of the fact that this brings poverty, there is also a discussion of food security, because what's happening is that we're emphasizing the need for people to grow food for export at the risk of leaving them without food for eating. So we become what we call net consumers. I think the term is net food consumers. So I grow food and then use the money that I get to buy food to eat at home, right? And that speaks into the bigger discussion of accessibility of seed, the fact that indigenous seeds have struggled over the years.
Malnutrition.
And you're also competing with farms or companies owned by people that have access to input. So they will choose to buy off from the other people and then put you in a position where they're going to they will determine the price with which they buy from
What happens to the milk in my district? If you go at 10 o'clock, there's no milk. They can't even sell it to him.
Also the fact,
But
also the fact that the president, I don't know, like I think he forgets that he's a president. When he was talking about milk and farmers and immunization, he said, now you see me, I can spend 15 million immunizing. We get it, sir. You never spend your money on anything else, right?
Money.
Yes, like if your children wanted to travel, they would travel. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that he's wearing a night-heel shirt, which is
very expensive.
Let alone expensive. Again, this is trivializing the lives of Ugandans, right? You talk about how you have refused to consume things from outside countries, but we know very well that your people, the people who are close to you and their children, have access to education outside of this country, of which Ugandans are struggling to consume education here. Your ministers, your Minister of Education, your commissioners in the ministries of education, their children don't go to UPE schools, they go to private schools. So that is essentially you telling us that you're selling the rest of the citizens of Ugandan garbage that you can't consume, but somehow you expect us to be in this boo-boo thing with you, right? So for you, your boo-boo discussion is around clothes. Our boo-boo discussion is, guys, we need healthcare, we need education, something the State of Nation did not also address. The software critical issues of people. Ugandans are not looking, Ugandans are not looking for money to buy Range Rovers. They're not looking for money to paint their nails. They're not looking for money to wear fancy clothes. They're looking for money because their people are in hospital and they cannot pay a bill of 20,000 shillings. We're looking for money because the health center one does not have the maternal services. The woman has to leave that village and go to a rural hospital where they're going to ask her for everything before she gives birth. People are going into debt just to get their children through school. They're going into debt to buy uniforms, to buy books. They're not in a debate of my child can't take Splash to school. So for me, that's the thing. Like, you're talking about Ugandans, like we are some people who are just looking for luxury, and yet people are looking for the basics. We're just like people are trying to stay alive. That is where we are. So for me, it's like that contradiction that you're very interested in numbers without looking at the lives of people. Even that investor of his of coffee, where is the hospital? Can you imagine? The permanent secretary of Ministry of Finance told us construction could not happen during the pandemic.
Because of rain.
That is the one industry.
That was
the number of apartments
that went up,
that came up during the pandemic, and you tell us construction couldn't happen? Like, you're dishonest. And then, like Mercy said, the foreign investor, I want to talk about it. The other thing is, I completely hear the president that we're in a global recession.
True.
Like, last year was hard, this year is hard. We need to brace ourselves because it's not getting any better. But our spending habits have not changed as a country. We are not trying in any way. The State of Nation address reminds me of the stories of parents who come home and tell their children they don't have money for school fees, but they're going to come home drunk every single day. Somehow they phone money to drink alcohol. And then that parent tells you, okay, now you go and work because we don't have money. But you see, they're not putting in effort. So when the state tells us that you need to brace yourselves while you're not being frugal as the state, why is the speaker and deputy speaker getting a new car now when we know that schools are going to need money in the next couple of months? Why are MPs allocating themselves allowances when we know we've cut a healthcare budget? We fired people who worked in the pandemic without paying them, right?
And now the cases are rising. Meanwhile,
yes, in the words of Dr. Otile, now that the cases are rising, who's going to treat the sick people? The ones you fired without pay? So for me, it's that, like, Museveni reminds me of myself like 4 years ago, where I would, even some of those habits, I still have them today, where I say next year I'm going to exercise because, man, I have to have a summer body. And then be like, I don't owe anyone a flat stomach. Next week I come back. And imagine, this is a head of state. So those are things he didn't even talk about. He didn't acknowledge that there's a recession. And because of a recession, citizens, we are a low-income country. We are going to behave differently. And that behaving differently does not start with, because you're asking people who are already having 1 meal a day before a recession to be frugal.
What are they going frugal about?
People who have been working already.
What are we supposed to do now?
Could you please weigh in? Yes.
Before we break, the headline this morning was Parliament has confirmed 193 million mileage allowance to buy fuel for MPs starting the next financial year.
Wow.
That is from 1st July. So every MP on a daily will need 1 million for fuel.
Wow.
That is our
This
reality.
is being frugal.
That is being frugal.
Oh.
But that is a headline this morning. So I do not know if those paradoxes we are speaking to speak for the everyday man, but I believe it a slap in our face on an everyday basis that I'll tell you to be frugal while I spend your money. And so it also speaks to the fact that the state is in adamance to the things that happen. No wonder, the whole Prime Minister can sit like you sit and you even fall. You don't know what to say because you're lying.
Her English was
Okay. In the case that her English was over, you have even tweets of people who are like, don't talk about our cars because they're for speakers of parliament. They're for your entity. Really, we do not need cars. We need hospitals. We need schools.
Yes.
We need food.
We need a plan for the rising COVID cases.
Karamoja is in hunger.
Buy
Deal with
bicycles,
those things.
people.
Exactly.
Buy
All right, so
bicycles.
ladies, let's take a break. And I know Mercy won't be coming back after the break. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for
It's always
having
a
me.
pleasure. And we will
pleasure.
definitely come back and have the conversation
Please.
on the women in the
On the women in the
plantations
I would
plantation.
like
in
to
the
have
Busoga
closure.
region. Yes. Thank you
I would
very
like to
much.
help Uganda with reality.
Maybe in her closing remarks.
Well, yeah. For me, everything that I said is alive for everyday people.
Yeah.
Even when me and you have the privilege to still afford our lifestyle, and there are people who cannot. And I think that we just need to come to a place of acknowledging the realities of Ugandans. We should not insult Ugandans because there's going to come a time when it's enough. And when people are willing to risk it all. I say this all the time and it will happen, and it will happen very soon. That same God that is used to wrap us around and sort of get us out of the place of complaining is the same God that will judge and hold everybody accountable. So I'll pull that same card even as I close, that he will indeed hold everybody in positions of power accountable.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll be back after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to the Women's Show on Civic Space TV. And today we are having a conversation on the State of the Nation address that was done by His Excellency, the President of Uganda. And before we went on the break, we concluded on the paradox, the different levels of paradox that we all experienced as the State of the Nation address was being delivered. But going on, there was, I'm not sure what word to use it. I don't know whether it was a rant on the hemorrhage, the hemorrhage in this country, and that is, I think, when we had quite a bit of conversation around Pineti, who Mercy had also spoken about earlier. And I know that before this show, we had the hemorrhage conversation. And for those of you who were not able to listen to the President's address or read the address, I'm going to ask Tricia to come in and just talk us through the hemorrhage conversation and your thoughts on it. Was it worth a worthwhile conversation to be included in the address? And over to you.
I think the President highlights that we need to deal with issues of environment, corruption, and the chauvinism in businesses that we've decided we've not understood well. But also he dwells time on corruption. I think the hemorrhage was in how much money leaks through the system. And I love Black Monday movement for one thing, is that they put the numbers there and asked government and state to take action. And so the president coming and I zoned out in between the speech when he kept talking about the hemorrhage. He talked about Usukuru Hills project, how they milked the Chinese man, and how much money goes through the pipes, and the leakages that are happening within the system that don't push for delivery of services. And through that rant, my question was, what are you doing about it? Because he came and had a conversation about all these things and no solution at any point to how we are going to deal with corruption. And to insult us more, like Maria said, is like, God, come abalava. Like, God, abalava. So you've reduced the solution to God, but you're the head of state. And it's in your mandate to be able to either put people to action or put your government or your state entities into action towards corruption. And so the lack of political will, even in his rant, speaks to a narrative of, I see it, but I'm not going to do anything about it. It will leak until it dries cow. This cow will die, but we will milk it anyway. And so going forward, when we speak of hemorrhage, if I was the president, I would be calling each entity of government to account or to go through an external audit that would, put in perspective what is milking the system and where is this money going. The state minister, I think, for accountability has been going on a tour within the regions. He went in Wakiso and he was seeing where the money has been spent, the state money has been spent. And every other time I would watch TV, even in those small moments, you actually realize the people that get this money don't care. They don't care whether it's a taxpayer's money. They don't care whether it's going to do a school, it's going to build a school, or it's going to build a healthcare. There was one incident where they went on a borehole and it had been repaired that morning when the minister was coming. And then the resident was like, this thing has not been working this whole time. And they didn't dig it. This thing has been here for a while. It's not the one they dug. They didn't dig any borehole. This thing has been hours. And so they're calling these, public servants to account, and they have no answer. But it begins from somewhere. It's not that they just woke up and decided that it's a man-eat-man economy, but they've learned over time, what can you do? And so that's a kind of hemorrhage. As much as he ranted about it, the solutions weren't there. Most probably just wanted to tell us, I see it and I know it. And that's just about it.
Okay, Maria.
So I'm going to start by first calling out Tricia, right? I don't think the solution should be the head of state intervening. We have systems and structures that should work. He's actually been the problem over the years, because for very often someone is arrested for corruption and then he
bails them out.
Yes, he tries to bail them out. We know a thief who was recently appointed a minister. And so it's important for us to understand that, like, we don't need him to intervene because we know he has been
part of the problem.
Like, he is part of the problem.
If he's not the problem.
Because when it comes to audits, if you want to, like, aside from the State of Nation address, if you want to voluntarily get annoyed as a Ugandan, I encourage you to just go and read the Auditor General's report. Like, if you want to be annoyed, because it is the size of the reports are enough to last you the whole year. So you can be annoyed every single day of the week. For 24 hours straight.
365 days.
So the audits are there. They know the magnitude of thievery. We also know that the judiciary is, the way that the judiciary is structured does not allow them, like, in terms of, like, the resources to be able to investigate some of these things to meet the beyond reasonable doubt requirement of prosecution. But again, that comes from a like, it's also like low-key a problem bigger than, okay, not low-key, but it's a problem bigger than the person of Museveni or the president of Uganda. It's just the way white-collar crime is treated across the world, that it is easier for us to send a teacher. I remember there was a story somewhere in the middle of the pandemic where a teacher was sentenced to 2 years in prison for stealing, I think, a temperature gun from a school. And the people for whom tents were blown away by the winds of the house that was built on sand have never been convicted. They just keep coming onto TV and saying, if you don't appreciate what we do, I always tell myself, like, as a public servant, if you come to tell us if you don't appreciate what you do, please resign and see if this country is going to fall apart. There was someone before you.
They will miss you.
Yes, there'll be someone after you. Let's not pretend like you're
helping us.
Yes, you're the bread and butter of life, right? The thing that I really want to talk about in terms of the hemorrhage, because he also talked about it in relation to the price of our products and how much like exporting a raw material costs and vis-a-vis how much people make from that. So he had really interesting statistics, used examples like South Korea. I think he also used China as an example, and really just talked about like the problematicness of international trade. And on that, I entirely agree with him that the way international trade is structured is that it is structured to not benefit low-income countries, but rather only high-income countries, because they are the ones that have the power to negotiate. Because they have the markets that we are trying to sell to. So the things that they negotiate make it easier for them to negotiate in their interest. So you can even see, for example, what happened during the pandemic when countries were asking for a waiver on the TRIPS agreement, which gives birth to things like intellectual property law and things like that. But for me, the thing that he also talks about, like that also comes from the history of colonialism, right? And that is, again, my problem with this cash crop discussion, because the cash crop discussion is a colonial discussion. It's a colonial, because our food system was harmed by that practice, by the bringing of cotton, coffee,
and we're still wanting to do it.
And we're still inside there. He also talks about modern day slavery, which is really funny, because the very same person who's talking about modern day slavery is the very same person who has intentionally refused to institute a minimum wage in Uganda in the interest of the very same white people that he's saying are taking our money. We don't even have a law on profit repatriation in this country. So even if I come from China and I invest here, I can carry all my money and take it back, just pay part of the corporation tax, which again is also being negotiated by rich countries to lower it, because then it's in the interest of their big businesses that come. A couple of years ago, TMS Rouge from the internet said that we need to start measuring the prosperity of our economies and our businesses by the number of businesses that leave the country and go and set up somewhere else, as opposed to the foreign direct investment that come into the country. And so for me, I think that is something that the president also needs to be thinking about. So when he talks about modern day slavery, he said you cannot plant cotton on 1 acre and get out of poverty. Your investors, Mr. President, cannot pay people 3,000 shillings a day and think those same people are going to get out of poverty.
The very investors were given taxpayers' money to begin.
Yes, they are given land. I know one for a fact who was sent to start a business and now has a piggery on the plot in this Uganda. That's a story for off the camera. But in the summary of it is that one.
That we have things
that the investors plot. And this person was given land, like lots of land. So for me, when it comes to certain things, like there are things that I appreciate that are beyond our struggles, which we are going to have to address as a collective on the continent, that it's time for African governments to sit down and know that like the system is structured against us. But it is also important for us to appreciate that the leader of this country is quite a dishonest person. And I don't say it like someone might want to sue me for defamation, but I have, like, we have seen speeches contradicting themselves year upon year. We were talking earlier about how we're not even being shown the progress in these areas.
This is what happened last year. This is where we are. This is where we are going.
He talks about services, ICT, and agriculture as the backbone. The permanent secretary of Ministry of Finance gave an entire speech on how agriculture shall not transform this nation. So for me, it's, guys, we are not goats. We listen to you. We have the capacity to read. We hear the things that you're saying. And for me, it's quite offensive, right? And so for me, and the hemorrhaging also is in the fact that today we are seeing more low-income people losing. Like the State of Nation address was a nation for rich people, was an address for rich people. It was an address for people who, when they say they are broke, it's because they are debating whether to take brewed coffee or to drink tea. Like, that's the debate that they're having. But when it comes to people who are already having one meal, people who pulled their children out of school, we're not having enough of those conversations. We're not having enough conversations about there's a new COVID is on the rise. You're going to see even the people who claim to be rich, one hospital bill like this, we're going into poverty. We're on the way this, right? And there's no clear solutions for that. So, and when the president says he's fighting corruption, let him first, afazali, okay, he can ask, right? And never do anything. I was going to let him ask for the tents that the wind blew, but he can ask for them publicly and return to normal state.
Yes.
He did even talk about the fact that as we're going into a global recession, we are borrowing money. You cannot credit yourself out of poverty.
You
can't
borrow
even their what parish development thingy is a revolving fund that is going to have interest. Poor people are going to stay poor. We talk about recovery, but we never talk about how are people getting the money to pay back. Because I'm going to borrow from Bella to pay back Tricia. Then I'm going to go to because if you go, yes, women are in one savings group borrowing right, left, and center, and so they're in a perpetual state of debt. Yes. There's an article that was written about solar pumps, solar power in Tanzania, and how people buy a solar pump on credit, and they spend a very long time paying back, and they just stay in poverty because we're trying
the
to
money
get
I'm making, I'm trying to pay back the solar pump.
So for me, the hemorrhaging is, the problem is our president is just he's just a Mogezia to Kwanjula.
Or he's equally part of the problem.
Yes, he's a Mogezia to Kwanjula. Their work is just to talk, but they're not in the thing to solve anything.
In the problem solving
role. Yes.
And yet in his address, it was a paradox. Again, in his address, he refers us to Galatians 6:7.
I really think he needs to quote Galatians 3 for himself, but we'll come back to that later.
So he reads from Galatians 6:7, and what you reap, you will sow. And the president goes ahead and he talks about rejecting sectarian ideas of past actors, which is noble. He also talks about patriotism and Pan-Africanism and socio-economic transformation and an investment in democracy. And then around there, he also talks about the fact that Uganda does not have refugees living outside Uganda. Okay, those are two different conversations. But let's go to these solutions which he gives, which I believe are noble.
In the coming budget, part of the money that is coming, the bigger chunk of the money, I think 6.9, is going to human capital development. What that means between me and you, more, they will tell you mindset change, what, CG. And so when you think of that and the narrative of patriotism that has constantly been coming, you know how now money hemorrhages.
Yes.
Because then it doesn't make sense. You're spending this much money to have a mindset change over poor people who are asking you to have a hospital that is functional, a mortuary recently filled that it was closed. But it's a mortuary and there are dead people in there. And people die every day. But it was closed. And it's something you can do something about. So when we speak of Pan-Africanism and patriotism, it is akin to saying, be proud of your country, but you can't say what the country has done for you. Because their children sit at home today that most probably have discontinued from school, not because they don't want, but because a system has been created in such a way that they will not be able to afford this education. Their mothers who have chosen, they would rather die at home giving birth than than deal with the crazy monies that are happening for them to just bring life to this world. And so the cycle of we speak of Pan-Africanism and come back home and not implement the tenets of Pan-Africanism I think it's an insult. I want to call it an insult, but that is Museveni for you. He has hinged on that, the former leaders of Africa who, at the height of, a change from colonialism into, self-governance, had, a passion for Africa and a vision for the future. And in that, he has managed to have all these military adventurisms on the globe. Someone said the East African community will work if the older presidents left. Then the new breed of presidents had taken over, and I think that they're also speaking to the Rwanda president as well. But in the Great Lakes region, we have Kenya building banks in Congo, having better impact. For us, we fight, loot, and leave. And then we have South Sudan, where we also have our troops fight, leave, and there is no impact that we've created that is lasting. There are no investors from Uganda entering the Congo. But you have other people making businesses that, either make money for their countries, but we speak of Pan-Africanism yet again. And so that oxymoron of we are building within the Great Lakes and within the East African community, yet it looks like, for the better part, our Pan-Africanism is not Pan-Africaning well. I can't say it any other way.
Pan-Africaning well. Yes.
And
It's
so,
not Pan-Africaning.
So we need to be able to interrogate the things that President says vis-a-vis the actions of the state and of his government. But going forward, when we speak of patriotism, I think as Ugandans, we cannot be any part of our country if we cannot feel the impact of, one, our taxpayers' money, but then also of the legislators and the leaders of this country. We've resorted to community, resilience, to Ubuntuism, to things that sustain us because we are on our own. So you can't call me to be patriotic when I'm on my own as a person, as a citizen. If Alesi doesn't give me money, perhaps I will not have a meal. You get what I'm saying? So that kind of population can't be called to be proud of their country. In the words of someone I know, if you get a chance to leave Uganda, don't return.
Don't return.
Period.
Maria, please come in and weigh in, but also as you weigh in, one would have hoped under normal circumstances that in the State of the Nation address that we had, there would have been a paragraph in these very many paragraphs on, and you spoke about it, on hope.
Sure.
Hope towards the people. And I speak of hope within the context of, for example, the arrest of the legislators. We know that Honorable Anna and Doreen Nyanjura were arrested, and they were arrested for speaking out against, the escalating prices. We also know that Kizza Besigye had the same situation. But then we also know that Kakwenza some time back. So there's this whole idea that it's not enough that you're suffering. You cannot talk about your suffering. So what one would have thought that we would have a speech of hope. Not necessarily to tell people not to riot or not to get angry, but something around you're justified in being angry, but this is what we are going to, this is the direction that we hope to take.
If there is a direction.
If there's a direction.
I have a question for all of you.
Yes.
Do you know your president?
So I said that. Hope.
So let me say two things, right? I know that there are Ugandans who watch the State of Nation address every year, hoping
I do.
that something is going to, maybe this might be the day.
This might be the it.
The fire fell from heaven. But there is a beautiful quote I got from, I can't remember the author, but I got it from a series called Criminal Minds. It says, hope is the worst of all human virtues, for it prolongs the suffering of people.
True.
Like for me, I think to be hopeful is a great thing, right? But to be hopeful, to express the hope, for Ugandans to express the hope towards this current existing system and structure is really to prolong your suffering. I am of the view that I hold that view. If you if you get a chance to leave Uganda, please go and don't return. Because it is better to suffer in the home of a stranger than to suffer in the home of your parents.
True.
Right?
True.
That's one. Number two, I think we need to get to a point where we render the state useless to us. Like me, I think I've come to the point where
And makes peace with it.
I'm less inclined to engage with the state. I'm more inclined in saying, guys, let's build parallel systems. So that when this MP comes during elections to Sijui what my circle, I'm like,
We fixed
bruh.
that issue.
where will they find something else, right? So that they notice that, so that we come to a point where when a funeral happens, an MP coming is like, dude, take your garbage away from us. We don't want to be a part of it. That when the president comes to visit an area, that we are too busy doing our own things, that we are completely uninterested. When the road isn't working, when UNRWA people come, for us, we've done our road. When they come, we ask them to move back with their things. Of course, the struggle with that is that they will still continue to collect taxes from us. And maybe one day Ugandans will get into the active business of trying to see a way of not paying all the taxes that are demanded of them. Because again, it's a response, it's a revolutionary response to the broken system. Now, on the debate of the arrest of like of Honorable Anna, Honorable Nyanjura, revolutionary Dr. Kanokiza Besije, and other people who have spoken out on the prices. Now, many of them, okay, not many of them, some people have expressed frustration with Ugandans not being bothered. Now, there's a class of Ugandans that really should like be part of these demonstrations, right? But then there's another set of Ugandans where I'm debating between going to the street and selling
and ending
10K.
up in jail.
No, let alone the jail discussion. I'm debating between being on a demonstration and being at my stall and getting 10K for my children to eat food. Like, the truth is, like, when Dr. Kanokiza Besije goes onto the street to demonstrate, not having food at his home is not the biggest worry, right?
Yes.
Right? Like, there's a shielding. And so I'm like, I used to be those people like, but you guys, I'm more sympathetic. I'm more empathetic because I can go and demonstrate on the street. Even if I did it for a month, even if I did it for 2 months, even if I did it for 3 months, I am not going to go hungry. My family is not going to go hungry because, like, the income I have available, or the people who, like, I can be able to do my work in the process. The people in my support system are able to hold fort for that time. But many people do not have this. And that's the majority of Ugandans. We always forget that. We always think the majority of Ugandans are the apathetic people. Like, those people, like, they're not choosing apathy. Apathy is choosing them because they have to choose between.
And they keep fighting every other day.
Every other day. Like, they are doing the one thing of waking up in the morning and saying, I am going to look for food.
And that's their revolutionary act.
And they live hand to mouth.
You guys, there's nobody. There's nobody in this country who wakes up in the morning and wants the state to feed them. That is the most dishonest lie we have been sold, that, oh, Ugandans just want government to do for them everything. No. Ugandans want a working economic environment where when I start my business, we're in the middle of a recession and KCCA is taking people's goods. Like, for once, let us move away from this selfish middle-class garbage. We're in the middle of a fuel crisis, and MPs are allocating themselves money for the crisis for fuel, as opposed to saying, how do we enhance public transport systems?
Do you know how much 30 million can do?
Yes, to ensure everybody moves.
Can be able to,
Yes, so for me, like, it's the inherent fact that our leader, the political elite class of this country, hates people. Period.
And on that note, we will close for that day. If you did not watch or listen to the State of the Nation address, the address is available on different platforms, and you can have access to it and read it. Read it for yourself. But more importantly, the budget is going to be read
tomorrow.
It's going to be read today.
They are reading it.
So there's a possibility that even as you watch this show, the budget will be being read. But it's important that you listen into that budget speech. It's important that you know where your taxes are going. It's important that you know the priorities of this country. Even if we know it now, it's important that you listen and be reminded of the priorities of the state. For God and our country, please have yourselves a great afternoon.